Picture this scenario. A man barges into a room, chest puffed out, talking at the top of his lungs, making absolutely sure everyone present understands he's not someone to be trifled with. He commands attention, everyone notices him. He leaves a lasting impression, everyone remembers him. Seems pretty cool, right? Wrong. Niccolò Machiavelli, the ultimate authority on power and strategy, would label this man a complete fool. Not because he's lacking in bravery, but because he fundamentally misunderstands the true nature of power. Machiavelli believed that one of the first things you should do to estimate the intelligence of someone in a leadership position is to evaluate the quality of the people they surround themselves with. The problem with adopting a tough guy persona is that you don't attract truly strong allies. Instead, you draw in users, potential enemies, and individuals just waiting for the opportune moment to witness your downfall. The loudest individual in a room is rarely the most powerful, more often than not. They're the most insecure, and if you're attempting to project an image of toughness, Machiavelli has a lesson for you. True power conceals its claws. Genuine strength operates in silence. The very instant you feel compelled to demonstrate how strong you are, you've already lost. Take a walk through any gym, office, or bar, and you're bound to encounter them. Men who have mistakenly equated volume with authority, aggression with genuine confidence, and intimidation with real respect. They speak louder than the situation warrants. They occupy more physical space than they actually need. They transform every casual conversation into a competition, every interaction into a test of dominance, and they genuinely believe this behavior projects power. But Machiavelli saw things differently. These men are, in effect, advertising their own insecurities. They're broadcasting their underlying fears. They're practically holding up a sign that reads, "I need you to think I'm strong because I don't actually feel that way." And here's what they failed to grasp. Everyone observing this display is constantly making calculations. The intelligent ones are subtly noting their weaknesses. The dangerous ones are actively formulating plans to exploit those weaknesses. And the truly valuable ones are simply walking away, disinterested. Why? Machiavelli explains it's due to a subtle but crucial element of human nature. People don't respect loud confidence. They respect quiet confidence. They don't fear obvious aggression, they fear unpredictable intelligence. They don't automatically follow the individual who demands leadership. They follow the one who consistently demonstrates it. And this critical misunderstanding leads to the first catastrophic mistake. The tough guy escalates situations that he's ultimately ill-equipped to handle. He writes checks that his abilities can't cash. He starts wars he's destined to lose. Machiavelli had a firm rule about this. Never engage in a war you can't win. But the modern tough guy consistently violates this principle. He becomes aggressive with the wrong person, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. He transforms minor disagreements into major conflicts. He converts manageable problems into life-altering disasters. And when reality inevitably strikes, it hits hard. Here's the harsh truth that brings down most people who try to act tough. You can't control the aftermath of an escalation. The moment you puff yourself up, raise your voice, or step forward aggressively, you've effectively lit a fuse. And you have absolutely no idea how long that fuse is or what it's actually connected to. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. A wise person does immediately what a fool does eventually. The fool escalates the situation first and only considers the potential consequences later. The wise person carefully considers all possible outcomes before making a single move. But the typical tough guy operates on raw emotion, not strategic thought. He feels disrespected at work and immediately becomes confrontational. He gets cut off in traffic and instantly launches into a road rage incident. He gets challenged at a bar and feels unable to back down without losing face. And here's what he doesn't realize until it's far too late. Every escalation is essentially a roll of the dice where the best case scenario is that nothing happens and you simply look foolish. The worst case scenario is that you encounter someone who's genuinely dangerous, well-connected, or simply smarter than you are. Because here's the dark truth about real predators. They don't need to act tough. They don't need to advertise their strength. They move quietly, strike with precision, and vanish before you even realize what's happened. The person who actually possesses power doesn't need to flaunt it. They don't feel the need to prove themselves in random encounters with strangers. They don't need to win every verbal sparring match. They don't need to establish themselves as the alpha in every room they enter. And this is where pretending to be tough becomes genuinely dangerous. You risk inviting retaliation from individuals who operate on an entirely different level. The quiet individual you disrespected might turn out to be incredibly well connected. The woman you were aggressive with might wield considerable influence. The employee you bullied might possess damaging evidence against you. Machiavelli referred to this as the fortune of fools, temporary success achieved through ignorance, inevitably leading to spectacular failure. The tough guy wins small, insignificant battles but ultimately loses wars he's not even aware he's fighting. And the worst part is that everyone sees it coming except him. Because while he's solely focused on projecting strength, everyone else is focused on actually being strategic. Machiavelli said that it's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But it's far better to be underestimated than overestimated. Machiavelli believed that visibility equates to vulnerability. The moment everyone is aware of your strengths, they begin strategizing around your weaknesses. But the typical tough guy does the exact opposite. He makes himself the most visible person in every situation. He ensures everyone notices his aggression, remembers his confrontations, and meticulously tracks his movements. And here's what happens when you become a visible target. You attract the attention of individuals who view you as a problem that needs to be solved. Not through direct confrontation, that's amateur hour, but through strategy, patience, and precision. The office tough guy becomes the subject of HR investigations. His aggressive emails get forwarded to management. His confrontational meetings get meticulously documented. His hostile behavior gets reported by multiple witnesses. Meanwhile, he naively believes he's winning because people appear to defer to him. He fails to realize they're building a comprehensive case against him with each and every interaction. Machiavelli called this the blindness of the tyrant, the inability to recognize that apparent submission often masks active resistance, that obvious respect frequently conceals genuine contempt, and that immediate compliance often precedes long-term revenge. And in the modern world, this plays out in devastating ways. The gym tough guy who intimidates everyone eventually encounters someone who's a professional fighter. The workplace bully who pushes everyone around eventually targets someone with connections to upper management. The social media tough guy who spews trash talk online eventually runs afoul of someone who can dox him, sue him, or destroy his online reputation. Because here's what the tough guy consistently fails to consider. In a world saturated with cameras, recordings, social media, and stringent legal consequences, every aggressive act becomes evidence. Every threatening statement becomes documentation. Every instance of intimidating behavior becomes ammunition for your enemies. And everyone becomes your potential enemy when you position yourself as a threat. People who might have been neutral become hostile. People who might have been allies become opponents. People who might have been willing to help you become individuals who actively work against you. This is what Machiavelli meant by making yourself odious. When your mere presence becomes a problem that others feel compelled to solve. When your behavior becomes a threat that others need to neutralize. When your attitude becomes a challenge that others need to meet. And the solution is never what the tough guy expects. Here's the career-ending truth about acting tough. It destroys your credibility faster than almost anything else you can do. Credibility is built on predictability, reliability, and competence. But the tough guy is inherently emotional, reactive, and primarily focused on establishing dominance rather than achieving tangible results. He's far more concerned with winning individual interactions than with achieving broader objectives. Observe what happens in professional settings. The manager who attempts to lead through intimidation ultimately loses the respect of both his superiors and his subordinates. His bosses perceive him as unstable and therefore unpromotable. His employees view him as insecure and ultimately incompetent. Machiavelli argued that true leadership is about influence, not force. The best fortress which a prince can possess is the affection of the people. But the tough guy operates from the diametrically opposed philosophy. He believes in ruling through fear and demanding respect through aggression. And here's why this approach invariably backfires in modern organizations. Fear-based leadership creates only surface-level compliance, while simultaneously fostering deep-seated underground resistance. People will do exactly what you tell them to do, and nothing more. They'll follow orders precisely, but they won't offer innovative ideas. They'll obey directives, but they won't contribute to innovation. Meanwhile, your reputation spreads like wildfire. The story of your explosive meeting becomes an office legend. Your threatening email gets screenshot and widely shared. Your aggressive behavior becomes the cautionary example of how not to behave. And in professional environments, reputation is everything. In fact, reputation is everything for a person in any setting or environment. It determines who wants to collaborate with you, who trusts you with important projects, who includes you in strategic discussions. It profoundly affects your promotions, your opportunities, and your entire career trajectory. But the tough guy remains oblivious to this reality until it's far too late. He wonders why he consistently gets passed over for promotions, despite his purportedly strong leadership style. He's confused as to why people seem to actively avoid him in meetings. He doesn't understand why his ideas are routinely dismissed, even when they're objectively good. Because here's what Machiavelli understood about the dynamics of power within organizations. Power flows to those who can be trusted with it, not to those who demand it. Power gravitates toward those who consistently demonstrate they can handle it responsibly. The tough guy, through his actions, proves the precise opposite. Every emotional outburst demonstrates poor self-control. Every aggressive interaction proves unreliability. Every instance of intimidating behavior reveals that he prioritizes his own ego over achieving tangible results. And there's something even worse than simply losing credibility. Once you're labeled as the difficult person, the hothead, or the problem employee, that reputation will follow you relentlessly. References get meticulously checked, professional networks get discreetly consulted, and damaging stories get surreptitiously shared. Your tough guy reputation effectively becomes your career ceiling. And the most painful irony of all is that the people who eventually surpass you are often the very individuals you previously dismissed as weak, simply because they chose diplomacy over dominance, strategy over aggression, and influence over intimidation. And this brings us to the most painful irony of all. Everyone perceives what you appear to be, but very few truly experience who you are. Machiavelli argued that the outward performance of strength often masks an underlying reality of weakness. And nowhere is this more evident than with individuals who feel compelled to act tough. Because here's the underlying psychological truth. Secure individuals don't feel the need to constantly prove their security. Confident individuals don't feel compelled to constantly advertise their confidence. Strong individuals don't feel the need to constantly demonstrate their strength. The very act of acting tough reveals precisely what you're desperately trying to hide: that you don't actually feel tough, that you're not naturally confident, that you're compensating for something you believe you fundamentally lack. And everyone can sense this intuitively. In the same way you can instinctively recognize a fake laugh, people can detect fake confidence. In the same way you can feel when someone is trying too hard. Others can feel your desperation to appear strong. Machiavelli referred to this as the appearance of virtue without the substance. Looking the part without actually being the part. Performing the role without possessing the requisite skills. And projecting an image that your actual capacity can't possibly support. And here's where this pretense becomes truly dangerous: when you base your entire identity on a performance. You become a hostage to maintaining that performance at all costs. You can't allow yourself to show vulnerability without feeling as though you're breaking character. You can't ask for help without feeling like you're admitting weakness. You can't back down from a confrontation without feeling like you're losing face. This creates what psychologists refer to as the imposter trap. You're trapped playing a role that doesn't truly fit you, perpetually maintaining an image that exhausts you, and desperately living up to a reputation that ultimately limits you. Meanwhile, genuinely strong and confident individuals operate in a fundamentally different way. They don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. They're comfortable showing vulnerability when the situation warrants it. They readily ask for help when they genuinely need it. They back down from confrontations when doing so serves their larger, strategic goals. This is what Machiavelli meant by the lion and the fox. A prince ought to be both a fox and a lion. The lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against wolves. But the tough guy only knows how to be the lion, all force. No finesse, all aggression. No strategy, all intimidation. No influence. And in a world that increasingly rewards adaptability, this inflexibility becomes a fatal weakness. The tough guy is unable to adjust his approach when aggression proves ineffective. He can't switch tactics when intimidation fails. He can't pivot his strategies when brute force proves counterproductive. So, he doubles down and escalates instead of adapting. He becomes louder when he should become quieter. He becomes more aggressive when he should become more strategic. He stubbornly doubles down on what's demonstrably not working instead of exploring what might work. And this is precisely when the real predators strike. Because they've been patiently watching, meticulously learning his patterns, and carefully identifying his weaknesses. They know exactly when and how to exploit them for maximum gain. Machiavelli understood that people generally judge more by what they see than by what they feel. Because everyone can see, but few can truly feel. People make decisions about you based on what they observe, not on your internal intentions. And what they observe when you act tough isn't strength, it's instability. Here's what happens to people who consistently act tough: they gradually become isolated. Not just socially, but professionally, emotionally, and strategically. Because here's what most people won't tell tough guys to their faces: they're exhausting to be around. Every conversation becomes a potential conflict. Every interaction requires putting on emotional armor. Every relationship feels like a negotiation with a hostile party. Strong people, genuinely strong people, actively avoid this kind of energy. They don't have the time or patience for constant emotional management. They don't want to have to walk on eggshells constantly. They don't need the unnecessary drama that inevitably comes with befriending someone who views every interaction as a test of dominance. So, who willingly sticks around the tough guy? Users, manipulators, and the weak. Those who directly benefit from his aggression. Those who can skillfully redirect his anger toward their own enemies. And those who are inherently weak themselves but feel vicariously stronger through association with someone who appears strong. But none of these people are actually loyal to him. They're only there for what they can get, not for who he is as a person. They'll abandon him the moment his toughness becomes a liability. They'll quickly distance themselves when his reputation becomes toxic. Machiavelli specifically warned about this phenomenon. Men who can be truly useful to a prince are rare. Those who merely appear useful are commonplace. The tough guy inevitably attracts people who initially appear useful but vanish the instant real loyalty is needed. When genuine support is required. And when true friendship would genuinely make a difference. And the isolation only intensifies over time. Because acting tough requires constant vigilance. You can never truly relax. You can never allow yourself to be vulnerable. You can never show doubt, fear, or even uncertainty without feeling as though you're breaking character and irreparably damaging your carefully constructed image. This creates what psychologists term emotional isolation. Even when you're physically surrounded by people, you're still fundamentally alone because nobody truly knows the real you. They only know the carefully constructed performance. And this emotional isolation has tangible, practical consequences. You don't get invited to the important conversations because people worry about your potential volatile reaction. You don't get included in strategic planning sessions because people can't reliably predict your responses. You don't get offered coveted opportunities because people consistently question your judgment. Meanwhile, the people you previously dismissed as weak are quietly building valuable networks, creating strategic alliances, and developing meaningful relationships. They're establishing trust with individuals who actually matter. Because here's what Machiavelli understood about real power. It's not about what you can forcefully do to people. It's about what people are willingly willing to do for you. It's not about who fears you. It's about who genuinely trusts you. It's not about who you can successfully intimidate. It's about who you can effectively influence. And influence requires genuine relationships, which in turn require vulnerability, which necessitates authenticity, which ultimately demands dropping the tough guy act and allowing people to see who you actually are as a person. But for many tough guys, this feels fundamentally impossible, because they've been meticulously performing strength for so long. They've completely forgotten what genuine strength actually feels like. They've been relentlessly acting confident for so long that they've completely lost touch with real confidence. Machiavelli famously said that since love and fear can hardly exist together, If we must choose between them, it's far safer to be feared than loved. This is perhaps his most famous quote, but it's also his most frequently misunderstood. People mistakenly believe it means you should actively cultivate a reputation for being scary, aggressive, and intimidating, but that's precisely the wrong interpretation. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for fear through aggression, he was advocating for fear through competence. Not fear of your temper, but fear of your capabilities. Not fear of your anger, but fear of the potential consequences of crossing you. There's a massive difference between the two. When people fear your aggression, they'll either actively avoid you or secretly plot against you. When people fear your competence, they'll respect you and actively seek to collaborate with you. Think about the people you genuinely respect. It's rarely the loudest person in the room. It's usually the person who speaks quietly, but everyone attentively listens. It's the person who doesn't feel the need to constantly prove anything because their tangible results consistently speak for themselves. This is what Machiavelli termed the appearance of necessity, when your inherent value is so obvious that opposing you seems inherently foolish. When your competence is so firmly established that challenging you seems counterproductive. And when your track record is so consistently strong that betting against you seems undeniably unwise. But this kind of lasting power takes significant time to build. It requires consistent performance over time, rather than the consistent performance of toughness. It demands achieving actual, verifiable results, rather than putting on theatrical displays. It necessitates possessing genuine confidence, rather than relying on manufactured confidence. And here's the beautiful irony. The people who genuinely focus on becoming valuable ultimately become powerful. Conversely, the people who are solely focused on appearing powerful inevitably become vulnerable. Because real power is ultimately about having options. When people genuinely need what you can provide, you inherently possess leverage. When people deeply respect what you can consistently accomplish, you wield significant influence. And when people inherently trust your judgment, you command legitimate authority. None of this requires acting tough. In fact, acting tough actively prevents it. Because tough guys are primarily focused on achieving short-term dominance instead of cultivating long-term value. They consistently prioritize immediate, superficial respect over building lasting influence. They ultimately choose fear over trust. Machiavelli understood that sustainable power comes from being indispensable, not from being irreplaceable through intimidation, but from being irreplaceable through genuine contribution, not from being feared because you're dangerous, but from being feared because losing you would be demonstrably costly. And this kind of power is inherently more secure because it's firmly based on what you can do, not on what you threaten to do. It's grounded in your actual capabilities, not in your willingness to escalate conflicts. It's built on your inherent value, not on your inherent volatility, which ultimately means you can confidently drop the tough guy act without losing power. In fact, dropping the act often increases your power because people can finally work with you effectively, trust you implicitly, and rely on you consistently. And this leads us to the ultimate Machiavellian insight. The wise person does immediately what the fool does eventually. The fool persists in acting tough until he's inevitably forced to be strategic. The wise person is strategic from the very beginning, which ultimately renders acting tough completely unnecessary. Here's what changes when you stop performing strength and start genuinely developing it. You become more influential. Not less, more respected. Not less, and more powerful. Not less. Because real strength doesn't need to constantly announce itself. It becomes evident in your consistent decisions. It appears in your steadfast consistency. It manifests in your tangible results. People intuitively feel genuine strength the way they feel genuine confidence. Not because you constantly tell them about it, but because they consistently experience it in their interactions with you. Not because you aggressively prove it through dominance, but because you consistently demonstrate it through quiet competence. And here's what Machiavelli fundamentally understood about lasting power. It's never simply about being the lion or the fox. It's about knowing precisely when to be which. Sometimes you need to be direct and forceful. Sometimes you need to be subtle and strategic. But the tough guy only has one tool in his toolbox: aggression. So, every problem inevitably looks like something that needs to be intimidated. Every challenge invariably seems like something that needs to be dominated. Every relationship instinctively feels like something that needs to be controlled. The strategically minded person, however, has a multitude of tools at their disposal: influence when appropriate, force when necessary, diplomacy when useful, and pressure when effective. This inherent flexibility is what makes them genuinely dangerous, not because they're inherently aggressive, but because they're inherently unpredictable, not because they're inherently loud, but because they're inherently calculating, not because they constantly threaten, but because they consistently deliver. And here's the ultimate irony. The people who consciously stop trying to look tough often become the most formidable because they've painstakingly learned to be strategic instead of reactive, purposeful instead of emotional, and effective instead of simply dramatic. They've truly learned Machiavelli's greatest lesson: that power is fundamentally a game of chess, not a boxing match. That influence is about strategically moving pieces, not throwing wild punches, and that real strength is ultimately about achieving clearly defined objectives, not winning meaningless confrontations. So, maybe the real question isn't, how can I look stronger? But rather, how can I become more valuable? Maybe it's, how can I cultivate genuine confidence? Maybe it's, how can I build real, lasting influence? The smartest thing you can possibly do isn't learning to act tougher. It's learning to be more strategic, more competent, more valuable, and ultimately more indispensable. Because when you become someone people genuinely need, rather than someone people simply fear, when you become someone people truly respect, rather than someone people merely avoid, and when you become someone people implicitly trust, rather than someone people merely tolerate, that's when you finally discover what real power genuinely feels like. And it doesn't require acting tough at all. In fact, it often requires the precise opposite: the quiet confidence to be authentic, the inherent strength to be vulnerable when appropriate, and the innate wisdom to recognize that the most powerful people in any room are usually the quietest. Machiavelli astutely observed this over 500 years ago. The real question is, how long will it take you to learn what he already definitively knew? If this perspective shifts the way you fundamentally think about strength and power, please let me know in the comments below which particular insight resonated with you most strongly. And if you happen to know someone who's currently trapped in the self-defeating tough guy act, please share this with them. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply help someone discover that they don't actually need to perform strength in order to genuinely possess it.